You have to know that there is a limited time of 6 minutes for the introductory remarks, but then we will engage in discussion and we will respond to questions from the audience. Vincent, you have the floor. Six minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much to Mr. de Montbrial and IFRI for inviting me back again at this wonderful event. I'm very honored to be part of this panel chaired by central bank and civil service legend President Trichet. This is really a treat for me. I'll try to give you a tour of the world economic outlook as we see it at the OECD in 5.5 minutes that are left for me. Let me start on a positive note. Global growth has held up fairly well over the past 3 years following the bounce back from COVID. And despite the enormous adverse supply shock imparted by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Of course, this global average masks sharp contrasts across countries. Compare, for example, the buoyant US performance to the stagnation endured by Germany, or compare India's dynamism to China's struggle to approach the 5% mark. Turning to inflation, central banks have tightened policy substantially in 2022, and the supply shock of that time has largely faded, so inflation is back to more comfortable levels, although service price inflation remains sticky in many countries. Remarkably, unlike in earlier tightening episodes, labor markets have remained quite buoyant, performing quite well overall. The euro area unemployment rate at 6.3% is at a historical low as we speak, and the US unemployment rate at 4.2 is still relatively low as well. So in that sense, central banks have achieved something like immaculate disinflation. However, even if inflation has come down, even if unemployment is not high in most countries, there is a feel-bad sense among consumers. Consumer confidence has languished both in emerging markets and in developing economies. To a large extent, this is the result of the price jump that occurred post-COVID and post-Ukraine invasion, with consumers feeling that the most visible prices, the everyday prices that you see at the pump and in the supermarket, have risen so much more than income in most countries. And besides, the lingering sticker shock experienced at the supermarket leads to the perception that prices are still rising fast because the price level is so much higher than before, even if inflation has actually come down significantly. While consumer confidence has languished, business sentiment has held up somewhat better, especially in services. And this tends to convey a more accurate sense of what economic momentum is at the moment. And against this backdrop, for the G20 countries, the OECD has the following fairly reassuring forecast that growth would continue at the global level to cruise around the 3% mark. This is true also for the OECD average, like for the G20. But again, performance is highly variable across countries, as you can see on this chart. Our inflation forecasts are also reasonably reassuring, even though inflation remains very high in some emerging market countries and uncomfortably low in China, where it rather flirts with deflation. Now, let me turn to the risks following this seemingly benign baseline forecast. One risk relates to energy prices. They could very well spike again, notably if geopolitics take a turn for the worse. Second, uncertainty surrounding trade policy has soared over the past few weeks. Many outfits have cranked out trade war scenarios with various assumptions about how sweeping and how high tariffs may be, how fast they might come into place, for how long, for whom, and with various assumptions about how exchange rates would react in this context, and about trade diversion, notably from China to Europe. that at the OECD, we have refrained from speculating about what we cannot yet calibrate in our models. Of course, we do worry that a more fragmented, protectionist trading environment and inward-looking policies would hurt supply chains, raise prices, and reduce competitive pressures that deliver productivity gains. This is, of course, very much in line with the theme of this year's WPC, and I trust Jean-Marie will have a lot more to say about this. Another risk pertains to public finances, which in most countries are in poor shape. One factor that supported growth in many economies during and after COVID is fiscal support in various guises, but some of that support turns out to be hard to unwind. If you think, for example, about Japan and Korea, where they repeatedly extend energy subsidies, contradicting their commitments on climate change, and even though energy prices have come down. Public debt ratios have reached new highs in advanced countries and in EMEs and in low-income countries. And at the same time, spending pressures associated with aging populations, climate action, and defense priorities. We see this week the Europe-NATO countries discussing how to bring defense spending up from 2% to 3% this year. All these pressures are building up on the fiscal side. And at the same time, interest rates are unlikely to go back to a near zero era as we have experienced before COVID. The BIS actually also echoed this concern just 2 days ago in their quarterly report. Turning to policies, we see central banks continuing to ratchet interest rates down somewhat. The ECB cut by 25 basis points again yesterday, the Swiss National Bank by 50, the Bank of Canada by 50. The Fed may also cut next week. The only outlier here is Japan, which continues to normalize monetary policy. And lastly, as to governments, not only are the debt ratios far above any comfort zone, but in flow terms, so looking at the deficit numbers, far greater efforts are called for to restore fiscal space and fiscal sustainability. Our main messages are quite nicely captured by the Bloomberg, Financial Times, and Wall Street Journal headlines that you can see on the last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent. I noted in the Gabriel exposition how we are vulnerable to deglobalization or friendshoring, as we say, or reshoring, particularly the European, and your figures were very striking. The idea that, Vincent, that the danger of trade disruption could be considered considerable is also something that is at the horizon of all what we say. I was also very interested in the figure on the debt, because when I look at debt, outstanding public and private debt today in the global economy, and I compare that with the same outstanding global debt as a proportion of GDP immediately before Lehman Brothers, I see that if this indicator is one of the important indicators, we are more vulnerable at the moment I'm speaking than we were immediately before the explosion of the great financial crisis. So we have to be very cautious in this respect, it seems to me.